Welcome to The Anxious Voyage. If you think that title sounds bleak or foreboding, one of two things must be true. You're very lucky, or you need to get out more. On this program, we share stories of life and living. We compare notes. We discover commonalities. We accept that life is a glorious, heartbreaking thing, and we embrace and celebrate all of it. Take the ride with us. We're glad you're here. Now, here's your host, Mark O'Brien.
Hello and welcome indeed. We are coming to you again and as always from world headquarters in tropical Middletown, Connecticut. I am honored and very happy to welcome my guest today. He is Peter Merrick, a financial consultant, author, and keynote speaker with more than 3 decades of experience in business succession planning, cross-border risk management, which we will absolutely come back to, and estate planning. Based in San Diego, as a Canadian expat, he holds the Trust and Estate Practitioner designation from the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners. He specializes in wealth preservation, tax minimization, and financial strategies for business owners, professionals, and families, particularly in U.S.-Canada cross-border contexts. He's an expert in cross-border insurance and annuity planning. And here's my favorite part. He is known for his direct and sometimes provocative conversation style. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Mark. I just want to share with you, I love that the fact that you read that bio, because I wish you'd read it to my mother. Because your mother's never taken, and I have an 85-year-old mother alive.
God
I'm very fortunate. And at the same time, she's not happy sometimes how direct I am, especially in my writing and my postings and my blogs.
That's actually quite fascinating to me, and I will tell you why. My mom died a shade over 2 years ago. She was 5 months shy of her 95th birthday. And as many times as I told her, she did not believe that I'm a writer because she read to me as a little kid. And I think my dad actually passed 14 years ago. For some reason, I found myself, and I don't know if I should say more able or more willing to write more directly once they were gone. So I think I should take my hat off to you for being willing to do it while your mom's still alive.
Well, can I just share something to you?
You can share anything you want with me, please.
Well, it's called the 100-mile rule. And let me share what that is. The further you are away from home, the more respect you get, because I meet Mark O'Brien at this current point where you've had a full life. So this is what I see. I just wrote a blog today talking about friends who are mirrors and who witnessed our lives during our lives. They'll remember me doing stupid things like smoking up when it wasn't legal, getting into a car accident, getting drunk when I was in high school, and half my insides would be out. These are things they remember. Now, people who meet me now, they meet me with out hair. And I used to go to the barber or whoever, and I'd say, take out the thinning shears. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. So that's one of the things that I wanted to bring out about the 100-mile rule, because most of us experience that. People who meet us now, they see us now, but those people, and there's also a specialness as well, because they've witnessed our lives. And the other thing that I want to share is I remember my grandmother. My grandmother, she died quite young. She was shy of her 72nd birthday, and she had a heart condition. She smoked probably 3 packs a day. She was she could go right, literally like that. Now, she also found out that she had cancer, and she laughed at that because she said, my heart's going to go before I get cancer. That being said, she got at that point, the FU passed. So my mother and my aunt were highly embarrassed because she would go to the doctor instead of like, they would say, no, she would speak her mind. And I remember saying to myself that I wish I get to that point. And I understand that only comes from falling down, getting up, and realizing it doesn't really matter. And yes, words have power. However, doesn't anybody remember that old saying, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me? And I realized I don't go out to be intentionally mean to people. However, if my values are crossed upon now, I'm going to speak out because my father, I shared with you, my mother's 85. My father died at 59.
Oof.
And as of last birthday, not the last one, but the one before that, I'm eligible for ARP. So what am I waiting for? When am I going to say it? Because the only thing that you and I have, Mark, is this moment. And that's the same that I'd like to say for the listeners and the watchers of this program. It's not about what happened in the past. It's not what happens in the future. This is the moment. So are you present to it? And I've had health scares in my life, and that made me more focused on being present.
This is somewhat facetious. I had someone tell me once, and I grant that it's probably now because of electronic communication and whatever, 100 miles. But somebody once told me that an expert is anybody who drives 50 miles to tell somebody else what to do. But I have a question about what you just said, and I absolutely accept what you said to be completely true. Do you find that when you meet new people, when you meet people who were not part of your younger life, not only are you likely to be more credible to those people, but they may reveal to you things about yourself that you hadn't been aware of before. Do you find that to be true?
I do sometimes. And at the same time, I'm going to go into another story
Yeah,
because I
please. That's
remember
why we're
this
here.
being, I just wrote about this morning because I thought about it. And I'll share with you my story in context. In 2019, I was a typical man. I just turned 50. I was ignoring myself. I was just working like crazy. I was planning things and I wasn't present. And I went to the hospital that day because I knew something was wrong. And when I got there, I had internal bleeding and I knew about it, but I ignored it. And I ended up having surgery. I got 4 pints of blood. I got 2 bags of iron, and I was there for 2 weeks. And my mother would share with me, and I sound like a mommy's boy now, but that's all I have. She said, me and my friends get kicked out after 2 days. This is Canadian healthcare, right? And it's like, they're keeping you here for 2 weeks. This is serious. And my hemoglobin had dropped down to approximately 30% of what it should have been. And they were looking at me like, how are you standing? Like I would have got, they said, you're probably like hours away or a day away from going to a coma, and that would have been it. If I had to finally listen that I needed to go and my coloring wasn't right. So I was open to go to San Diego. And I was flying back to Toronto every 3 weeks for 10 days. And, it was great because it was the middle of winter, getting on a plane Friday evening. You're in Connecticut. You know what I'm talking about, right? You have 4 seasons. And knowing that I was going to be wearing a t-shirt and I could go swimming in an outdoor pool, and this was my life. It's not like I was like going on vacation. Like I was there for work, but I knew I was going to go. Well, COVID happened. And I chose not to participate in the worldwide experiment. In Canada was hell. Couldn't go back. They actually they put you in prison. Well, they didn't call it that, but you would have to go into a motel and pay for being there 2 weeks, $3,500. Isn't that crazy? The Canadian government would force people, they'd punish people like that. There were people who didn't do it because they knew their constitutional rights, but they didn't stop the government from doing these mandates and scaring people to follow the rules. And I was isolated. I was very isolated. I was in a place that I'd never been before. Now, as I shared with you, the weather's beautiful, right? Like, I don't have to wear shorts. I could wear this jacket out right now, and it's like it's anywhere from, let's say, 65 degrees in the winter to a high of, let's say, 80 in the summer, and there's really relatively no humidity, and it's a blue sky, very similar to the background, or even less clouds than the background that you have with us. And I felt very isolated, you know, and during that time, things in my marriage didn't work out. And I remember a meeting I had, and I wrote about this morning. So it's so topical that you brought this up, Mark, that in my early 30s, I was working with this very wealthy man whose net worth was 9 digits. And he wasn't with anybody, and he had an only child, and they lived in Denmark. And it's the middle of February. You know, he called me in to do a specialty that I had, moving something he had set up tax-wise that he wanted to get rid of. And we hung out for a bit. And then one day I turned to him. You know, he was a nice guy, jovial. He was like friendly. He was a nice guy. And I said, Barry, why the hell are you here? Why aren't you in Arizona? Why aren't you in California? Why aren't you in Florida? Why the hell are you here in February in Toronto? Money's not an object for you. Like, you know, like I felt comfortable enough to have this conversation. Money's not an object. He says, Peter, I got such good friends. I said, Barry, you'll make new friends, or that's what I'm thinking. Now that's a 30-something, early 30-something thinking this. Now you're talking to someone who's 56 years old. About a month ago, I came back from going back to Toronto. I needed a vacation after that because I hung out with people who really cared about me, people who knew my story. The problem about meeting people here, they don't know my story. I could be bullshitting about my story. I could be, you know, they won't know anything. I'm just a guy. And just to share with you something that was sort of humiliating, because this guy found it interesting. I met this one guy. He's a columnist for the San Diego Tribune. You know, very fascinating guy. His wife was running for mayor of San Diego. You know, I met him at an event, and we're hanging out, and he goes and says to me, what do you need? What do you need? And I told, and I said, I really don't need anything. He says, you must need something. And I realized, I know the laws of reciprocity. I'm never going to ask you anything, Mark, unless I've actually earned that social capital. And I'm never going to, when I do use it, I'm never going to ask you to do something outside of your capability. So it's just going to be, so he keeps on saying this to me. And I said, well, you know, the issue is when I was back in Canada, in my area of expertise, there would always be a professional who would bring me in the room and say, that's the guy. And I had been there forever. Like I was on television. Like my whole life was there, right? Like I knew everybody. Like I could even get to the prime minister if I wanted to, you know, just because I sat in the same place for so long, right? Yeah. And I said, I don't have those people here. I'm just a guy who walks the street. You know, my ex-wife made a joke. She said, the only people who have my color are people who sleep on the street. I'm saying, well, you people, you San Diegans don't appreciate it because people still ask me, where did you go? I'm going, here. Here. Like, how can you not just, like, I walk everywhere. Like, why would I get in a car? Like, I can appreciate this because in Connecticut, you can relate to this. You either have cold or humid.
Yep.
I'm thinking, why would I stay in? Mark, you're special because right now I'm indoors for you and your beautiful audience.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't mention this to you before we went on the air, but you may have noticed that Lonnie Ray, who's been on this show a couple of times, she posted something about your upbringing and about, without going into too much detail, what you had to
Ask.
endure in a boys' school that you attended for quite some time. I don't know if you want to share that story, and I also
I'm
wanted to say
fine.
to you, you have said now a couple times. Now I'm going to tell you another story. This program was created for people to come tell their stories, because it's the only way that we meaningfully relate to each other.
So I'll just give you some backstory. I might be prolific now because it was important to me, because when I was young, I was classified as being dyslexic, a learning disability. And whatever those tests, the IQ tests and my academic tests, we're talking light years apart. And my parents were suggested, there was a new school that had been created. It was on a military theme. And they said, this is really great. Small classes, everything, build up his self-esteem, everything. And I think the person who created had a really good idea. And it was outside in the rural areas of Niagara region, which is near Niagara Falls. It's very country-ish, and it was by itself. And the closest town that was like 5,000 people or 3,000 people was like 10 miles away. It was very isolated. And a lot of the kids going there had certain issues, right? It was a military school. And many of the staff who were attracted to the school were flawed personalities.
I can imagine.
And it was back in the early 1980s. So kids had less rights than they do now. And I like to think I was smart, because after 4 months of the most terrific experience I had ever had, because we had corporal punishment, and for the first few months I received that a lot. I discovered later on, because people kept it quiet, there were a few guys that I was close to who were sexually abused. And I always felt, the way I always looked at it, I said, hey, that never happened to me. But I'll tell you, the worst thing was, I was smart enough to learn a system. My cortisol was, for the 4 years I was there, was really high. The worst thing is the witnessing of kids who were being punished, and it was above and beyond just normal punishment. And it was just like the context. Now, I grew up with Holocaust survivors, so I was always able to say to myself, well, hey, it wasn't so bad, because look what they lived through, right? Because it's all contextual, right? It's all contextual. I said, hey, I have an uncle who lived in the middle of March. They would have to have, I don't know, bulrushes, and they would like live in a swamp when they were being searched to be hunted. So I would say it was minimal in comparison. But that was very difficult. So just to share with you that, years pass, we start talking, and right now there's a major lawsuits happening, not just against the school and the insurance companies, also against, it looks like it's going to be the provincial government, which is equivalent to a state government. It's going to be the Canadian Armed Forces, because they were all supporting this. They were all supporting this, and everyone has their own stories. However, the tough thing about life is, even though I had issues about the school, I don't believe I would have found a lot of stuff about myself that I really appreciate about myself unless I'd gone there. I learned to know systems. You mentioned that I specialize in cross-border tax, everything. Well, part of that came from, okay, I'm in a closed system. How do I maximize my freedom for the least amount of work? and I became a studier. And if I hadn't been in, and how do I not get in trouble? Think about that. Taxation, here's a closed system. How do you work to go and make sure you get the maximum benefit for the least amount of cost? If I had not been in that total institution, I'm sure they were innate to me, but that environment created an opportunity for that part of my, like that muscle, doing, to come out. So I have mixed things, because the part I dislike the most, because the question I never allowed myself to ask until recently, what would I do to you, Mark, if you did to me, to my kid? I never allowed myself to ask that question. Now, in Canada, the maximum prison is in Kingston, Ontario. And I literally didn't have to think about it. I said, I would be in Kingston. If someone did to what happened to me, I would be in Kingston.
Yeah.
Now, let me share with you the benefits of being there. During COVID, especially in Canada, I was getting approximately 2 million impressions on LinkedIn. Now, that's unheard of, because I was speaking out. I didn't really understand why I was doing it. It was like a compulsion. And I wasn't talking nice stuff. I was talking code, and those in the know knew what I was saying. And I was really directing it towards Canada, because up until 2019, I thought Canada was the greatest country in the world. And the reason I thought it was the greatest country in the world is for the same reasons it's the worst country in the world. It was very liberal. It was great for like letting immigration in. It didn't have the First Amendment. It had public health care, all that stuff. And it belonged to all these international treaties, and we felt we were punching above, our weight class, because, we were active in the UN and everything. And like people say Canada. And I know when I traveled through Europe, you'd see Americans wearing Canadian flags. It's because they would be treated better back then.
Yeah.
I actually had a real wake-up call, because I realized the things that I admired were the things that had imprisoned. And also, I used Hansel and Gretel, got them nice and fat and compliant. So when they actually did this, they were like lemons, and they just went off the cliff, and I couldn't handle it. The reason I bring up that story, or that experience during that time, I had seen this before, and I didn't realize it, like why I had this visceral reaction. You are not going to tell me what to do if it doesn't make sense, just because you have the power to tell me. There's a saying, and I can't remember the guy's name, but it's like, I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees.
Yep.
Because at an early part of my life, at 11 years old, where I didn't have advocacy, and I had people who were very flawed, should not have been around children, they took that away. And there's something that most people don't know, but it's a perfect term, and maybe this will be the gem of our interview, and that's called a dog king. Now, the story goes that the Swedes defeated the Danes in the 600s. And to humiliate the Danes, the Swedish king appointed a dog to be the Danes' king. So all the edicts that were ridiculous, which were humiliating, were coming from a dog king. Well, that's the most beautiful terminology to talk about who Biden was to me, who Justin Trudeau was, who Ardern was, who Macron was. All these people were dog kings. And in essence, if I listen to an idiot, who's the bigger idiot? It's a form of humiliation. And at that point, I didn't even think. I had to take my experiences from being in a total institution where I had no rights. I was 11 years old when I went there. I was 5 feet tall and I weighed less than 100 pounds. And now I'm 6'2". Well, I was. I'm sure my vertebrae is like shrinking. And I weigh about 215. And now I can advocate. And the worst thing that I want to share with your audience is to live with regret. And that's what that saying means. I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. That regret is so overpowering because I could give you $1 billion, but if you do something that is completely morally impugnant and you happen to be a human being, not a social or psychopath, you sold your soul. And that is the only commodity that anybody truly has. And I wish upon your listeners to understand that value is the commodity, and that's what you are being coerced to sell.
On that note, I would like to take our first commercial break. That's actually a perfect segue, and I'll reveal to you how and why that is when we come back. So please stay with us. We will be back in exactly 3 minutes.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
Ever wonder what it's like to have your own radio show? Well, wonder no longer, because you can dip into the radio airwaves by being host for the day on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network. It's a fabulous way to get your radio feet wet. It's an opportunity to market your business, modality, or book. Have a guest, mention a sponsor, and take callers. Or you may want to facilitate a lesson by going solo. It's up to you. Listeners can be online, mobile, in cars with Bluetooth, or listen through Amazon's Echo by asking, Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. For more details, go to dreamvision7radio.com and click on Host for the Day.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brands, distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Hello and welcome back. I'm here with my guest, Peter Merrick. Peter, you were talking in the last segment about the experience that became productively informative to you in the boarding school you were sent to. And while you were talking, it reminded me of this book, The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. One of the things that he says in here is that the coping mechanisms that we develop as young people in difficult circumstances, and you may or may not be aware that my dad was a Marine, so I share your aversion to being told what to do, and I share your aversion to corporal punishment. Anyhow, one of the things Dr. van der Kolk says is that those coping strategies that we develop in our young lives don't serve us in our older lives and may actually work against us. But what occurred to me is one of the things that you said in your book, The King of Main Street, is that we are now in a thought economy. And it seems to me that experience in that school may also have instructed you about how and why we have evolved into a thought economy. Has that ever crossed your mind?
One of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about, and this is a late gift that happened to me. It wasn't until 25. I started writing and I discovered that I loved writing. And I mean, I wrote things that I was interested in, and I became a prolific writer. In the old world, I had over 800 published articles in from the Wall Street Journal to Bloomberg's, all the traditional, and all the Canadian as well. Mm-hmm. And it allowed me to step back, say, I agree with you. The question we should be asking, does this work for me now?
Yep.
And I spent, you read The King of Main Street. I read everything I could on cults, on male maturation, on all sorts of stuff. And it wasn't until recently that I realized that I was trying to decult myself. Because one of the problems that people have is they never address something and say, it doesn't work for me now.
Yeah.
So they remain the age they were when they developed the coping strategy. And I've become very aware of my shortcomings. And there's more and more shortcomings. And I can even make fun of myself because when I was reading my research, when I read over 250 books and academic papers on aging, specifically male aging, the highest archetype is the jester, the court jester. It's someone who can poke fun at the king, which represents you and me, and able to laugh at it. And, maybe the powers that be will make an adjustment, a small adjustment in their thinking. And that's the highest level of a male archetype. I agree with you that if you don't address it, then it could be what destroys you because you've outgrown like those pants. And at the same time,
no, please go ahead.
So that's why for me, writing has been the greatest thing that I've ever gifted myself. Now, I enjoy that if you enjoy what I've done, but the greatest audience of what I write is me, because I made out of the same stuff that you are. And if it resonates with me, it's going to hopefully resonate with other people. And at the same time, in the book that you read, The King of Main Street, my last book, I start that book consciously because I write consciously. I want to know, how do I feel? And I write with intent. I don't just write. And I want to talk about Lonnie after this because she's been very helpful. So in that book, I put in the Van Gogh of writing, and that is Herman Melville. And I want to share this story because I put it there intentionally. I talk about Moby Dick and what it means. That's not the story. The story is, here is Herman Melville, writes 2 relatively successful books. He writes Moby Dick. Moby Dick is a disaster. It sells 3,000 books. It was printed in 1851. No one knows about this book. And then 72 years later, 32 years after Herman Melville is dead, in 1923, D.H. Lawrence writes a book on the great American literature. And he has 1 chapter dedicated to Herman Melville's first 2 books. And he says the greatest American novel ever written is Moby Dick. Now, I thought about it because I always like, stepping back, how would I feel? When you share your stories, Mark, I step back and say, well, how would I feel? Because I don't know how you feel. I'm going to go and ask, how would I feel about that? And maybe that will make me empathic. I'm thinking, this guy was broken. He never saw his success. It was out of copyright. So it ended up being taught in every school. D.H. Lawrence, who was the Steven Spielberg of his time, said this is the greatest book that's ever been. And back then people read. So they read his book. That book became what we all know. But he was dead for 32 years too. He died in 1891. And I think about that. I said, okay, who is the greatest audience? Because there's a good possibility I'm not going to have any audience for the stuff I write. So I better enjoy it. And I want to share something with you because I think it's pivotal. When I became a stockbroker, I got this book and it said, okay, you got to write these things out, to sort of plan and stuff like that. Like what do you want? I wrote what I wanted. I want a car. I want a big house. I want this and this and that. And then the second question, why do you want it? And when I looked at why I wanted, I said, you're a disgusting human being. You want the outside world to validate you. I feel so lucky that was such a pivotal moment in my life. So when I was writing it, I said, I don't like that guy. He wants the car because of that. He wants the house because of that. He wants other people to say he's okay. He's not able to do it himself. And I'm talking to myself. I said, this is really, and that's when I started learning NLP. I became a master trainer in neuro-linguistic programming, my language. I took up method act. I did everything. I learned 3 personality typologies. I can administer the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator. I went to the first 5 international conferences on the Enneagram. I studied the Claire Graves spiral. I read everything I could on language. I studied Milton Erickson, hypnosis and language patterns and things like that. And it wasn't motivated for other people because, let's be frank, I spend a lot of time by myself, and I'm a pretty honest person, but it's not because I don't want to screw people. Mark, you're not worth me feeling shit. Like the outcome, it might be the same when someone says I'm an honest person, whatever. Well, the outcome for me is nobody's worth it. I'm old enough to know the repercussions of things, and nobody's worth that. Nobody's worth me doing it. So taking a shortcut ends up being a prison sentence because I sell ideas and I have belief in the things I sell. And as soon as I'm not able to believe in what I sell, I can't sell them.
Yeah, I could. I'll just tell you this very quickly, and then this was a very short segment. We got to take another break. So I was at a trade show once, someone, one of my clients introduced me to a guy in the booth next to his. And he said, I want you to meet Mark O'Brien. He's the best salesman I've ever known. And I was absolutely crushed. And I was in my hotel room that night wondering, why would he say that? And I went back to see him the next day. And I said, do you remember what you said to this guy? I'm the best salesman. And he goes, yeah. I said, what do you think? Like I'm a huckster or a snake oil salesman or something? He started laughing. He goes, no. He said, when you're talking about something that you passionately believe in, you have no idea how contagious you are. That's what he said to me. And I said, oh, I can live with that. All right, let's take this break because we got so much to cover in the third segment. So please stay with us. We'll be back in exactly
Lonnie Ray. We're going to talk about Lonnie.
We'll get to her. We'll be right back.
Are you ready for the quantum age?
Humanity's next step in evolution?
Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you to the extraordinary platform of evolutionary voices for the quantum age.
Let's explore. Learn more about this upcoming age where we bridge science with spirituality.
Where potentiality meets reality.
Where we take compassion into action.
Our trailblazers and visionaries will ask the whys, the what ifs, while igniting continuous possibility.
Come along with us into an age beyond what we know today, where we can grow together in unity consciousness.
Experience evolutionary voices for the quantum age, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern on DreamVision7Radio.com.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brand's distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to DreamVision7Radio.com.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told. And the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Hello, welcome back. Thank you for staying with me and my guest, Peter Merrick. Peter, I know you're just dying to say something about Lonnie Ray, who actually was my guest as recently as 2 weeks ago today. What would you like to share?
Well, Lonnie came in my life. Like I would like, you know, the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I like to believe I'm like the kid who thinks that he's going to turn around the corner and he's going to just find the golden ticket. It keeps me going. It's a bit of a childness part of me. You know, as long as I wake up in the morning, one of the things that I joke with everybody, I'm nice to you, Mark, because I might be here at the wheel. You know, life is a wheel, right? But it's a wheel. I'm always going to be down there. So, and as you know, it's well, again, it comes down to how do I want to feel? Now, it's I like, you know, people liking me. I don't like confrontation. I want things to go smooth. I want to have a good relationship with people, because who wants to fight with people? That being said, I had stepped into one of my lulls. Like I shared with you, my marriage ended. California wasn't the best thing for me personally. I was readjusting myself. However, one of the things that I'm very proud of is I write, and I write extensively. You know, if people want to read some of my blogs, petermerrick.com, or they can go to It Starts With Gold. And there are two types of articles. One are more focused on the economy, the other one, what I'm thinking. And I wrote a lot, and I wrote something, and someone that Lonnie knew had read it, and she called me up, and we got along fabulously. And she says to me, will you write something for Rattled Awake Volume 8?
Mm-hmm.
I thought about it. I said, I don't know. Well, that was a starting point for me, because what that allowed me to do is to express all these things that I'd realized specifically about COVID, about narratives, about taking control, how to deal with people, how to find out where people are. Because there were times during COVID, I was more scared of the humans than the virus.
Amen.
I really was. I was really scared. I had family members who were treating me like I was dangerous. You know, they were the way I don't know. I believe my immune system is the greatest thing that's ever been.
I will just tell you, I lost friends.
I lost friends. I lost family. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I was disinvited from my niece's wedding because I was considered dirty. And, you know, it's just, it's unbelievable, you know, but I have new family. I have new people. I have real conversations. Well, one of those people I had a conversation was Alexis Ray. She's going to hate me for that. Lonnie, Ray, Alexis, Ray. Like, but you can tell we're friends. She asked me to write. And I wrote something which was called It Matters. And it was like a 12-page document, manifesto, observation, things like that. And I really started organizing my thoughts, because I did all this writing, but I hadn't done writing. And another thing happened to me. When I came back from Toronto about a year and a half ago, someone had introduced me to someone who did a lot of podcasts in the freedom movement. And I shared with you that on LinkedIn, I was getting about 2 million impressions a week when I was writing. Just a joke, a guy who ran a large financial firm managing about $25 billion, he takes me out to lunch. He said, how do you do it? And I said, you're watching a man have a nervous breakdown in public. He was like, yeah, I went, yeah, you know, because I would, like, everything I wanted to do, I had to write. And I wrote it out. And a gentleman approached me, and we started talking, and he started his business up again after selling it in 2019. His name's Adrian C. Spitters. And we started he's out in Vancouver. And, you know, I'm living in San Diego, and all my world is back in Toronto. So, you know, the only person I could talk to at late, because if I call you at 10 o'clock at night, it's going to be 1 o'clock. So it's going to, you know, and my world is there. So we started talking. I was very interested. He was dealing with people who had made choices in their lives, and they wanted to deal with someone who didn't have the cognitive dissonance of, like, things are okay, not to ask questions. And we started talking, and what came out of it is we decided to go and take all our experiences, use gold as a metaphor, not as, the thing. But gold, the precious metal, is part of it, but it represents de-risking your assets and rematerializing your life. And one of those experiences that, I finally got into thinking that maybe I could write a book because I was in a lull. Because the book you mentioned, The King of Main Street, I thought that was my opus. And I could do a whole radio program about how I got so close, and then COVID happened, and I watched it just go by. Just go by. And I watched my whole life go by. I saw my practice go. I saw my marriage go. I saw everything go by. But when you're up, you just have to listen. People show up. Lonnie showed up. Adrian showed up. And let me just share with you what Adrian and I did.
Please.
I thought I had written my best book with The King of Main Street that you so graciously mentioned. I hadn't. We wrote this book. It starts with gold. I'm just trying to show it so it doesn't. There
you go.
Is it bright?
There you go. Right there.
Is that bad?
Yep.
Actually, that's not the sun. That's actually the image. That it looks like the sun.
I'm sorry. I just want to mention.
Please.
I know you're a writer, and I know you're a writer because you said you thought The King of Main Street was your opus, and I once read an interview with Stevie Wonder, and the interviewer said, "What's the best song you've ever written?" And Stevie Wonder said, "I can only hope I haven't written it yet, because otherwise I have nothing to do." So I would put you in the same camp with Stevie Wonder. As long as you're still thinking and determined to commit yourself to writing, you're a writer.
Can I share something that actually I took it as a compliment and an insult. My speaking agent, I do a lot of keynote speaking.
Yeah.
And my speaking agent says, "You're the best writer that nobody knows."
Oh, you know what? I actually think that might be an advantageous position to be in, because first of all, nobody's ever said that to me. But if somebody did, I would just work all the harder. And I will just tell you, I didn't go to college till I was 28, but I had a high school guidance counselor say to me like this: "You will never go to college." I didn't know how long it was going to take me, but I knew right in that moment that guy was wrong, and I was going to make sure that he was wrong. So I'd love to be in your position.
Well, I fell into it. It's not something that I knew. I just knew that I read a statistic, and I don't know if it's true because a lot of people might not like this statistic because they might fall into this statistic. 70%, up to 70% of human beings don't have internal dialogue. They feel, they see images, but they don't have their own internal dialogue. I can't hear music in my head. I know that you enjoy music. The voice in my head is pronounced. I shared with you that I swim an hour every day, and through that exhaustion, it quiets down. So I have incredible discussions. I could basically play out our entire lives together, Mark, from every angle in my head. That being said, I learned by slowing down and writing it out and really asking myself what I think, because people don't realize that you could have a conversation going on in your head in loops for 20 years. Really, all thoughts are is fast-moving energy. Going back to giving an opportunity for my book, this is slow-moving energy compared to here. And you have the ability to reorganize that energy and put it back in here. And that will allow you to have conversations. Because, for example, I teach public speaking. People wonder, how is he able to get up and just speak? for me, it's really simple. I breathe. I learned to say and instead of And on top of that, I say, well, I ask myself, what are you feeling right now? And I'm able to have this whole bookshelf of like, maybe over 1 million pages that I've written in my life. And I'm able to say, oh, and I've spent the hours, and I can even remember the time that I articulated that saying. And I just want to share that with you. One time I'm on national television in Canada. And, well, there's two stories, but there's a question that is hurled at me. And it's like, I thought about it. I'd written about it. And it's like the national interviewer, he had me on a panel. He said, Peter, do you think they should put more money in the Canadian pension? And because there was a socialist economist on. And I said to him, I said, Don, and I practiced this other than the Don part. I said, Don, I'm a Gen Xer. I believe I can go across the street to the grocery store, buy a lotto ticket, and have a better chance of getting any money from the government than I do from investing more money into these pensions. Now, I practiced that in my head for years, and I was able to just reach in because I'd written it out. I'd even stated it, and I was able to reach in and do it. The other time, I was on national television. I didn't know what happened to stock markets, but I had written something out that I said, like, the markets can be described in 8 words. The downs are temporary, the ups are permanent. And the guy says, oh, you feel so relaxed. Like, it's just, I feel really calm because the markets had dropped like that time, maybe about 300-400 points. This is not when it was at this level. And I'm going, well, I was just able to reach in. And people who don't know the thousands and thousands and thousands of hours I've spent writing, they'll say, wow, he's so articulate. He's so smart. I'm going, I'm not smart. I spent the time asking myself what I believe. I put it on paper. And I feel very fortunate that some of my stuff resonates. And on that particular day, Lonnie Ray read one of my pieces, and it resonated. And I want to leave one last thing with you, that I wrote for the largest CPA publication in Canada for years. And rarely did I ever get anybody writing a letter to the editor or contacting me. I would go out places and people would look at me strange. You look familiar. I would go to like tax conferences. You look familiar. And I'd ask them if they read the bottom line, and they said yes. And I said, I've been writing for 16 years for them. Oh yeah, I read your stuff all the time. Didn't do anything. So when someone reaches out to you, that means so much more. Before the internet and whatever, politicians knew in Congress that if one person wrote a letter, that was equivalent to 50,000 people were thinking it. So I'm grateful for anybody who reaches out to me. I am grateful that we're talking today. Everybody, I agree, has a story. And the anxious voyage, I want to ask you a question. Why the anxious voyage?
Because that's what life is.
Why that name?
Because that's what life is. And it's what we make of it. And that's why it also says at the beginning, it's about life's trials and triumphs. Because if we don't, you said this earlier, not in this many words, if we don't endure the trials, we can't earn the triumphs. That's why we need to be tested. So I'm sorry, because we are running out of time. However, I got 2 more pages of notes over here that we didn't even get to yet. So if you wouldn't mind, I would love to have you come back on. And before we
Please.
go, I know people can find you at petermerrick.com. And it starts with gold.com.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm going to ask
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you. I'm going to ask everyone who's joined us today to go find you on those 2 websites. And Peter, I promise you, I will be back in touch with you. And we're going to do this again because I can't leave these notes unaddressed. So thank you. And to all of you who joined us today, thank you too. I will see you again on the next show.
Thank you for tuning into The Anxious Voyage, the program dedicated to sharing stories, helping people, and celebrating life. You can see and listen to The Anxious Voyage on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you have a story to tell, or if you know someone who does, please email the host, Mark O'Brien, at mark@o'briencg.com. In the meantime, please remember, the only bad stories are the ones we don't share.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.